On the sun-baked asphalt, a driver found a devastating sight. It was a bobcat, but like none he had ever seen. Her fur was dazzlingly white, a rare albino bobcat. Pressed to her side are tiny, trembling creatures. Her kittens were still alive, but fragile, and they looked just like her. A desperate rescue begins, but survival is only the first challenge. What follows is a race against time. One woman's desperate mission to keep them alive. From heartbreak to hope. This is the story of a mother's wild spirit reborn through her young. An extraordinary fight for survival that would leave even the most hardened rescuers in tears. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The sun on Route 8, just outside Floyd, Virginia, was a hammer. It beat down on the blacktop, raising a shimmering heat haze that distorted the distant mountains. The pre-dawn dark was a distant memory, replaced by a high noon glare that bleached the color from the sky and baked the scent of pine and hot asphalt into the air. Jebediah Jeb Sweeney knew this road better than his own face. He'd been driving this same logging route for 45 years, and his truck's air conditioner was fighting a losing battle against the Virginia summer. He was easing his truck around the tight curve at Tuggle's Gap when a shape burst from the deep shade of the roadside pines. It wasn't a deer. It was too low. It wasn't a dog. It was too graceful. It was a flash of impossible, brilliant white against the sun-scorched road. Jeb hit the brakes, the truck's air system hissing in protest, but it was too late. He hadn't felt a thump, but he knew. He knew. He pulled over, the heat of the engine washing over him as he killed the ignition. His heart hammered a painful rhythm against his ribs. Pushing his sunglasses up on his forehead, he stepped out into a wall of thick, humid heat. Dust kicked up by his boots hung in the still air. He walked back 50 feet, squinting against the glare rising from the pavement. He found her on the gravel shoulder. It was a wildcat, but like none he had ever seen. Her fur was thick and dazzlingly white, not the mottled brown and gray of a normal bobcat. It was stark, brilliant, and shockingly stained crimson along her flank where the sun hit it directly. She was motionless. A profound sadness settled on Jeb, stark and heavy in the oppressive heat. Then he heard it, a sound almost lost in the drone of cicadas from the trees. A high-pitched mewling. He knelt, his own shadow falling over her body. Tucked against her belly, seeking the meager shade she offered, 3 tiny creatures were pressed into her still warm fur, trembling. They were white, too. Perfect miniature copies of their mother, their eyes sealed shut against the harsh light. Jeb's breath hitched. "Oh, my Lord," he whispered. His trembling hand went to the radio clipped on his vest. He didn't call his dispatcher first. He called the number taped to his dashboard, the one for the SWVA Wildlife Center. "This is Jeb Sweeney driving Route 8, he said, his voice cracking. I think I just hit a bobcat, a white one. Ma'am, she's dead, but there are babies. They're still alive." 20 minutes later, Sarah Jenkins, the lead field rescuer for the Southwest Virginia Wildlife Center, pulled her van onto the shoulder, its flashing lights pale against the brilliance of the day. Jeb was still there, a large, rough-hewn man standing guard, his broad back to the sun, casting a protective shadow over the tragic scene on the ground. "She's over here," he said, his voice thick with guilt. "I didn't even see her. She just appeared." Sarah knelt, her professional gaze taking in the tragic tableau. The mother was, indeed, a true albino, a genetic marvel, and a terrible loss. "It's not your fault, Jeb," she said softly, already pulling on her thick rescue gloves. "An albino bobcat has poor camouflage. She was hunting at the wrong time in the wrong place." She gently felt the mother. Stone cold. Rigor mortis was setting in. Then she turned her attention to the kittens. They were impossibly small, their eyes barely open. She scooped them up one by one. 2 were mewing faintly, their bodies trembling. The third, the smallest, was limp and silent. "This one's critical," she said, more to herself than to Jeb. She placed all 3 in the portable incubator she'd brought, a small, heated box lined with fleece. She touched Jeb's arm. "Thank you for calling us. Thank you for staying. You saved these little ones." Jeb just nodded, unable to speak, and watched as her van disappeared. The drive to the wildlife hospital in Roanoke was a blur of quiet urgency. Sarah had the van's heater blasting, aimed directly at the incubator. "Hang on, little ones," she whispered, her eyes flicking between the road and the temperature gauge on the box. "Dr. Karen is waiting for you. Just hang on." The smallest one let out a single faint sigh, and then was quiet. Sarah pressed the accelerator a little harder. They burst through the doors of the small animal hospital, a building that always smelled of antiseptic and anxious hope. Dr. Karen Reynolds was waiting, her face etched with the familiar weariness of 1,000 midnight emergencies. She was a woman of few words and immense skill. "On the table. Get the oxygen," she ordered. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, the tragedy became clinical. The 3 kittens, none weighing more than a few ounces, were laid out on heated pads. "Hypothermic and hypoglycemic," Dr. Karen murmured, her fingers expertly probing. She looked at the smallest one, the little female that Sarah had worried about. She pressed a stethoscope to the tiny chest. Silence. She checked for a pulse, a corneal reflex. Nothing. "This one's gone," she said flatly, a mask for the tiny chip of pain each loss took from her. She didn't survive the cold. Sarah's heart sank, but there was no time for grief. The other 2 were fading. "We'll do everything we can," Dr. Karen whispered, her voice softening for just a moment. That was her promise to every creature that came through her doors. For the next 2 hours, the room was a blur of quiet, focused motion. Dr. Karen and Sarah worked in tandem, a well-practiced ballet of desperation. They administered subcutaneous fluids, drops of warmed dextrose solution on their gums for sugar, and fashioned tiny oxygen masks from syringe casings. The 2 survivors were fragile, a male and a female. They were chilled to the bone, their faint purrs sounding more like a mechanical vibration than a sign of life. They were placed in a top-of-the-line incubator, a sealed plastic box where the temperature and oxygen levels could be precisely controlled. "Now we wait," Dr. Karen said, finally stripping off her latex gloves. "It's up to them." They named them Alpha and Lily. Alpha, the male, was slightly larger, with a feisty, demanding squeak. Lily, his sister, was quieter, a little weaker, and she seemed to carry the shock of the morning in her frail body. For days, the hospital pulsed with their rhythm. Every 2 hours, the alarm on Sarah's phone would chime. A new batch of KMR, kitten milk replacer, would be warmed. Sarah or Dr. Karen would gently take them from the incubator, swaddle them in a warm cloth, and offer the bottle. At first, they barely had the strength to suckle. Their tiny paws, armed with needle-sharp claws, would grip the latex glove of the person feeding them, a desperate, instinctive act of holding on. After each feeding, they were burped and then gently stimulated with a warm, damp cotton ball to encourage them to go to the bathroom, a job their mother would have done with her rough, loving tongue. The public, having heard the news of the rare rescue, was captivated. But they didn't see this part. They didn't see the midnight feedings, the frantic checks for dehydration, the quiet prayers whispered over the humming incubator. They only saw the miracle, not the work. After a week, Lily's purr grew stronger. Alpha's eyes, a pale, translucent blue, a mark of his albinism, began to focus. Their fur, which had been sparse and matted, began to fluff, like cotton bolls bursting. "They're going to make it," Dr. Karen said, a rare, tired smile touching her lips. "They're fighters." After 3 weeks of intensive, round-the-clock care, they were stable enough to be transferred from the isolated hospital wing to the main SWVA Wildlife Center. Here, they were given a larger, multi-level den enclosure, filled with soft bedding, hollow logs, and small branches to begin climbing. And here, the team set up a camera. "The public is invested in them," Mark, the center's director, explained. "This is a huge educational opportunity, and frankly, we need the donations." The Albino Bobcat cam went live. Viewers across Virginia, and soon, across the country, tuned in daily. They watched Alpha and Lily wrestle, their clumsy paws batting at each other. They watched them stalk toy mice, their little bodies wiggling before they pounced. They watched them sleep, curled together in a pile of white fluff. They were a sensation. Miles away, in a small, cluttered cabin nestled deep in the woods of Floyd County, Jude Abernathy paused mid-scroll, a chipped ceramic mug of coffee halfway to her lips. Jude was a wildlife rehabilitator too, but she was a solitary creature, a legend in the state network. She specialized in one thing: bobcats. She understood their silent, solitary language better than she understood most people. She'd spent more time in the Blue Ridge Wilderness than in town, and at 67, her face was a roadmap of sun and worry. She was scrolling through the SWVA Facebook page, a professional courtesy to keep up with the network. She saw the headline about the live stream. She clicked. 2 white kittens appeared on her screen. They were tumbling over a branch. Jude's breath caught in her throat. The mug clattered as she set it down, coffee sloshing over the rim. It wasn't just that they were white. It was the way they were white. The faint, almost translucent quality of their fur. The specific set of their ears. The way the female, Lily, paused and watched the camera, her head tilted with an intelligence that was achingly familiar. Jude's hands began to shake. "It can't be," she whispered. She went to a battered metal filing cabinet in the corner of her cabin and pulled out a thick folder labeled Snowfire, 3FALB, 2024. She flipped it open. Inside were photos, intake forms, and rehabilitation notes. A year earlier, a farmer had found an adult female albino bobcat in a foothold trap. Her leg was mangled, but Jude, with Dr. Karen's help, had saved it. The rehabilitation of Snowfire, as Jude had called her, was the most challenging case of her career. The bobcat was wild, fierce, and incredibly smart. For 6 months, Jude had worked to heal her, keeping her distance, minimizing human contact, respecting the animal's wild nature. But a bond had formed. A quiet, professional respect. Jude had watched her for hours on a monitor, marveling at her silent, precise movements. Releasing her had been the hardest part. An albino predator was at a severe disadvantage. Jude had wrestled with the decision, but the law and her own ethics were clear. Wild animals deserve to be wild. Jude had commissioned a special, lightweight GPS collar. She'd released Snowfire in a protected, remote section of the Jefferson National Forest, far from people. The collar had transmitted for exactly 24 hours. Then, silence. Jude had searched for weeks. She'd hiked miles, checking game cameras, looking for tracks, calling until her throat was raw. She'd found nothing. The guilt had settled deep in her bones. She had failed her. She had sent a ghost into the woods, and the woods had claimed her. Now, staring at her laptop screen, she finally understood. Snowfire hadn't just died. She had lived. She had found a mate. She had given birth. "It's her," Jude whispered, tears welling in her eyes, a strange mix of profound grief and sudden, sharp joy. They're hers. By dawn, Jude's ancient pickup truck was parked outside the SWVA Center in Roanoke. She walked into the intake room carrying the Snowfire file. Sarah and Dr. Karen looked up, surprised. Jude rarely left her mountain. "Jude," Karen said, wiping sleep from her eyes. "What's going on?" Jude didn't say hello. She just opened the file on the intake counter. "I think I know your kitten's mother." The room went silent. Sarah and Karen stared at the photos of Snowfire. The resemblance was absolute. The intake location from the farmer's trap was less than 10 miles from where Jeb Sweeney had hit her. We never made the connection," Sarah said, stunned. "We thought she was a wild born." "She was wild," Jude said fiercely. "I made sure of it. She had my help for a while." Jude looked at them, her gaze unwavering. "She's dead. That's on me. I put her back out there." "Jude, that's not true," Karen began. "Let me finish the job," Jude interrupted, her voice thick. "She's my case. Her kits are my case. They're albinos. They're already at a disadvantage. If you raise them like normal bobcats, they won't survive a month. They need to be raised by a ghost." She tapped the file. "They need to be raised by her." Mark, the director, was called. The proposal was unorthodox. SWVA had protocols. But Jude was the best bobcat rehabilitator in the state, perhaps the country. And these were not normal bobcats. "What do you mean, raised by her?" Mark asked. "I have hours of footage," Jude explained, her mind already working, a steel-sharp purpose. "Videos I took of Snowfire while she was in my rehab enclosure. Sounds I recorded. Her chuffing call. The sound she made when she was stalking. The sound of her eating. They're her children. They carry her instincts. I can use her to teach them." It was agreed. Jude volunteered to stay on site, moving into the center's small guest cabin to oversee the full rehabilitation of Alpha and Lily. The public live stream was altered. A sign was posted, explaining that the kittens were entering a critical wilding phase and human contact would be minimized. The camera was repositioned to a more distant observational angle. Jude's work began. She set up a system of speakers inside the enclosure and a small, weatherproof screen hidden behind a log. Her laptop was her command center. She was no longer a caregiver. She was an illusionist. The first test was feeding. The kittens were used to Sarah and Karen, used to the soft cooing and the warm bottle. Jude stopped all that. She waited until the kittens were hidden, then used a chute to deliver their food. Now cut up meat. As the food appeared, she played a recording. It was a low, soft chuff-chuff, the sound Snowfire had made to call her. The first time, Alpha and Lily were confused. They looked for the source of the sound, but the smell of the food drew them in. Jude was patient. Every single feeding. Shoot. Chuff-chuff. Food. After a week, a change. The moment the chuff-chuff sound played, both kittens bolted from their den, running to the food chute. They had connected the sound of their mother to the presence of food. Jude's eyes watered as she watched the monitor. "That's it," she whispered. "She's still here. She's still teaching you." The lessons grew more complex. The staff provided pre-killed mice. The kittens, raised on cut meat, were wary. They batted at the small, furry bodies. Jude played a different recording, the sound of Snowfire tearing into prey. Alpha, the bold one, pounced. He mimicked the sounds he was hearing. Lily, the watcher, observed. And then, with a precision that was pure Snowfire, she delivered a perfect bite to the back of the neck. Jude began using the video screen. She projected footage of Snowfire stalking a bird outside her enclosure. The kittens watched, mesmerized. Then Jude would drag a feather tied to a string past their den. They began to practice. They learned to lower their bodies, to creep, to use the scant cover of their enclosure. Days folded into weeks, weeks into months. The cuddles and playtime that the livestream viewers had loved were gone. The staff kept their distance. Voices were low. Hands were scarce. The kitten's enclosure was expanded, then expanded again, filled with dense brush, tall trees, and a running water feature. The online comments turned critical. "They look lonely. Why is that woman, Jude, just watching them on a screen? This is cruel. They need love." Jude read them one night and let out a dry, humorless laugh. "They don't need my love," she said to the empty cabin. "They need hers, and they need to learn to be invisible." Jude's hardest test was for herself. As the kittens grew into lean, muscular juveniles, their instincts sharpened. But they still associated the chuff with food, with mother. One afternoon, Jude was doing a routine check of the fence line. Lily, now sleek and powerful, saw her from across the enclosure. Lily crept forward, not in fear, but in curiosity. She sat just inside the fence, staring at Jude. Then she let out a low chuff. She was asking, "Are you the one? Are you her?" Jude's heart shattered. Every instinct screamed at her to speak, to answer, to go to the fence and tell her how beautiful she was, how proud her mother would be. Instead, Jude made herself cold. She stood perfectly still, meeting Lily's gaze with the flat, neutral stare of a non-threatening unknown. She did not move. She did not speak. She simply was. Lily watched her for a full minute, her pale blue eyes searching Jude's face for a sign. Jude gave her nothing. Finally, Lily chuffed again, a small, questioning sound. When Jude remained a silent statue, the bobcat's posture changed. The curiosity was replaced by wariness. She was no longer a kitten looking for a mother. She was a predator assessing a human. With a flick of her ear, she turned and vanished into the brush, a silent white shadow. Jude sagged against the fence, the breath leaving her in a painful sob. It was the cruelest, kindest thing she had ever done. The lesson was complete. Humans are not your mother. Humans are not to be trusted. The final test was live prey. A rabbit was introduced into the large enclosure. The kittens, now nearly full-grown, watched it from the trees. This was not a mouse. This was fast. Jude played the sounds of Snowfire on a hunt. The long, patient silence, the rustle of leaves, and then the explosive sound of the pounce. Alpha tried first, charging in, all clumsy strength. The rabbit juked and was gone. Alpha looked frustrated. But Lily was her mother's daughter. She hadn't moved. She waited. She watched the rabbit's path, noted its patterns. She waited for the stillness after the sound. When the rabbit paused to nibble, Lily descended from the tree like smoke, silent and absolute. Jude and the SWVA team watched on the monitor. It was fast. It was clean. It was perfect. They were ready. The day came in late spring. It was a bright, clear morning, the Blue Ridge Mountains exploding in 1,000 shades of green. Alpha and Lily were no longer pacing behind fences. They were in transport crates in the back of Jude's truck. Their coats shone under the light, their muscles taut with contained energy. They drove for 2 hours, deep into the Jefferson National Forest, to a protected wilderness area miles from any paved road or human settlement. Dr. Karen and Sarah came in the SWVA van. There was no press. There were no cameras, save for Jude's own. This was not a spectacle. It was a homecoming. They placed the 2 crates side by side, facing a dense thicket of mountain laurel. Sarah and Karen stepped back, giving Jude the moment. Jude knelt by the crates. She looked at Alpha, who hissed at her, a sound that made her proud. "You be smart, you big brute," she whispered. "You listen to your sister." Then she moved to Lily's crate. The female was quiet, watching her with those piercing, intelligent eyes. Snowfire's eyes. Jude pressed her hand against the wire mesh. "Your mother was a queen," she whispered, her voice thick. "She was the bravest wildcat I ever knew. I'm sorry I couldn't save her, but I saved you. This is her legacy. This is for her." Jude stood up and nodded to Sarah. "Open them." Sarah and Karen unlatched the gates from a distance using ropes. The metal doors swung open. Alpha was a blur. A flash of white against the green, he bolted from the crate and was gone, crashing into the undergrowth without a sound. But Lily walked out. She took 3 steps, paused, and her body went low to the ground. She tasted the air. She listened to the breeze in the pines. Then she turned. She looked directly at Jude. It wasn't a look of thanks. It wasn't a look of affection. It was a look of acknowledgement. A silent, piercing gaze that spanned the distance between their 2 worlds. It said, "I see you, I know you, and I am wild." Jude nodded just once. "Go on, girl," she whispered. "Go home." Lily turned, and with a single fluid leap, she vanished into the laurel. One moment she was there, a sliver of white, and the next she was part of the forest. The 3 rehabbers stood in silence for a long time, listening to the quiet of the woods. "Do you think they'll be okay?" Sarah asked, her voice small. "They have their mother's skills," Jude said. And they have each other. They'll be more than okay. They'll be legends. Jude watched the spot where they had disappeared until her old knees ached. She watched until the echo of their mother's bloodline, a white flash in a green world, had faded completely. A slow, tired smile touched her face. She had fulfilled her promise. The debt was paid. Snowfire's story hadn't ended in tragedy on a lonely road. It had just begun. They were home.